Hello, I have a super awesome technique to share with you today on how to get information about your SharePoint environment into Power BI. And the brain behind this technique is Jordan Murphy, who sent me a message on LinkedIn, and I'm going to put his LinkedIn information in the video description in case you want to reach out to him. But essentially, he offered this up as a video topic idea, and I thought it was super awesome. So thank you to Jordan for sharing this. And long story short, there's a ton of really good data in the OData feeds in the back end of SharePoint. And what Jordan did is he came up with a query that can get sites and subsites from that OData feed and then invoke a function to run a query on the particular information you're looking for across all of those sites in the query so that you can essentially get a tenant level reporting out of the SharePoint OData feeds. Today, we're going to start with getting a list of the sites, and the list of sites actually does have the latest modified date and the recent and lifetime views information in it. So that's super awesome. If you're a SharePoint administrator, you know that this is in the SharePoint admin portal. But with this, we can create a Power BI report off of that data so that other people can see it. So for instance, your IT manager, or you could also link it to, for instance, your site collection administrators with row level security so that they can see all of the sites that they manage. And again, this list of sites is important to do first because we need the paths of each of the sites in order to run queries against all sites in our environment. You can also use this technique on single specific sites. So if you're just trying to get information about the site you own, this will work for you also. But I do want to point out that you need permission to at least read the things that you're running a lot of these on. Otherwise, your results list will be showing you only the things that you have access to. So even if you're a SharePoint administrator, oftentimes in modern SharePoint, you won't have explicit permission on every single site collection in your environment. And this will only pull the list of sites that you explicitly have access to. So what I would recommend if you're trying to do this long term to report on everything in the tenant is to have a service account that is set up to have access to all sites that you can use to run the data connection here. And if you're not familiar with service accounts, they're just basically a licensed account that has the permission level that you're looking for that people don't log into on a regular basis. So it's just used for the data refresh. It's better practice to use a service account for this sort of thing than it is a regular account, both for business continuity reasons, meaning you don't want it to fail if you leave, but also for security because you don't want to always have access to absolutely everything in your environment. Consider a service account. And I do also, before we jump into how to do this, I want to give you a little look at everything that is in the OData feed so you can see if there's something in there that you might find useful other than the site list. So what I've done here is I've connected to the root of the OData feed. And what you can do is you can click through these things and just browse the content that's in here. In this case, I have it connected to the root site in my tenant. So it's not, since we haven't created our functions yet, it's not doing this across all sites yet, but I just want to show you the stuff that's in the OData feed. And I'll show you how to set this up too in a minute. I just want to give you an idea what's in here first. So essentially, what you can do is just scroll through here and click on things to browse what's available in the OData feed. So for example, if I go to lists down here and I click on the white space around table, at the bottom here, if I drag this up a little bit, you can see what's in here without actually navigating down into it. So it's got basically all sorts of information about all of the lists. So it's got the number of versions that the library is set to or the list is set to, and whether or not it appears in search results. Somewhere in here is the last modified date, which is very useful. The title of the list obviously is in here, but also the views and all of the fields. And if you find something that you want, you can click into it. So if I click on this word table here, it's going to navigate down, and then I can expand the different things that I am interested in. So for example, somewhere in here, I like to use this view tab and go to columns. You search for item. The items is something that you can expand. So you can expand all lists to show all items and information about those items. You can do the same thing for views. So if I expand this default view, that'll give me the path for the list, which is useful. And then if I want to go back up a level, I can just delete this step that I did to navigate down and go look at something else. So other things of interest in here, if I search for cycle bin, there is all of the content of the recycle bin for this site, meaning we can make a global searchable recycle bin to browse. There is also activity data. So somewhere at the bottom here, this activities table, that's going to be things that are happening in SharePoint. So this one is a little bit trickier to work with because it uses item IDs instead of, say, file names. So you have to kind of really massage the data to get what you're after, but it does work. Just keep in mind that if you have a really large environment, that you're going to want to limit activity data or item data to a specific site, not all sites, because SharePoint will throttle you for sure. So just the massive amount of data that it would try and pull doing that, it'll time out before it finishes running. So for activity data, if you just expand action here, it'll tell you what activity type it is, and then you can filter on the specific type you're interested in and then keep expanding down. I'm going to do more videos on how to get stuff out of these things, so keep an eye out for that. I'm not going to go into super detail right now on every single one of these, because today we're just going to be getting a list of our sites so that we can invoke functions on that list of sites. So back to what we were originally doing, I'm going to open up a new Power BI file and start this from scratch so you can see the process. All right, so we're going to go to transform data. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a parameter here for our tenant root URL. And I'm going to do that just because later on when we make functions in here, it's nice to be able to decide what you want to be running that function on, whether you want it to be running on a single site or all your sites or specific other site, that kind of thing. So it just, the parameters makes it easier to switch back and forth between those things. So I'm going to make a new parameter. And I'm going to call this tenant root URL. You can call this whatever you want. And this is going to be https://. This is your root site in your SharePoint environment. So mine is like this, and no trailing slash, because we're going to put that trailing slash into the OData feed URL instead. So just be mindful, you don't want double slashes here. All right, so we're ready to get our OData site information. So if we go to the new source menu, select OData feed, and then go to the advanced tab, it'll let us select the parameter we just created as the base for the URL. And then I'm going to paste in the query bit here. So take out my extra spaces, put in the extra forward slash here. So this API path is what we were looking at a minute ago when we were browsing through the different things in the API. So it's inside there, it's doing a search, and it's querying for content class STS site and STS web. So STS web is going to be our subsites. If you, for whatever reason, don't want this to return subsites, just take that part out. I feel like having the subsites in there is very valuable because getting reporting on subsites in SharePoint is very difficult. And by difficult, I mean it doesn't exist without third-party tools. So we want that. And then click OK. So here's our query. I'm going to rename it. SP sites. Oops, SP sites. And now we're going to expand this down a whole bunch of times. So go to the primary query results, click on the word record to expand it. And then go to relevant results here and click on the word record to expand that. And same thing, we're going to go to table, click on the word record to expand it again. And now we're going to click on the word list next to the word rows here, expand that. And this we're going to convert to a table. So there's this to table button in the top left, click that. And then click OK on the box that pops up. So next step, we need to add a column. So under add column, go to index column. This index column is very important, so don't skip this step. And then we can keep expanding this column 1 to get to our actual data. So just keep clicking this double arrows button and keep expanding it down. And when you get to here, do expand to new rows. And then click it again. And now we have our actual data. So we're going to uncheck this value type field here because that's going to interfere with the pivot. So you just want to keep key and value. Click OK. We're going to filter this down to just the fields we care about before we pivot, because what I've found is if you don't filter it down a bit, you get an error. So a lot of this is garbage, by the way. We don't need all of this data because a lot of them are just blank. So we're going to deselect all and then select the things we want to keep. So I'm going to keep author. That's going to be who created the site. And content class is going to tell us if it's a site or subsite. These culture and deep links are blank. I'm not sure what those are about. I'm going to keep the description. Importance is blank, so don't bother with that. You can browse through this and look and see what the values are to see if you want to keep them. We definitely need to keep path. I'm going to do parent link also because that's going to tell us which subsites belong to which parent sites. And this last modified time we want. Rank is kind of interesting. I'm not sure what goes into the rank calculation, but it does appear to be pretty valid. All right, I'm not sure what the difference between site description and description are. I'll just keep both for now and we'll look at it. Site ID we want. Site name is actually the path, so you don't want that one. You want title instead. And the unique ID, for whatever reason, is always a bunch of zeros. So what you actually want is the site ID. And then the views information. So views lifetime, views recent. And then web template is going to tell you what site type it is. So like, is it a team site versus a communication site? And click OK. Now we need to do our pivot. So go to the transform tab in the ribbon, and then with your key column selected, click on pivot column. That's good. And then for aggregate, change it from count to don't aggregate. That's under the advanced options, and click OK. So that puts it in a lovely table for us. If you want to, you can remove the index now. I'm just going to leave it in there. Let's see what our the description and site description appear to be the same thing. They have the same values in it. So we can go back to this step and uncheck one of those, the gear menu. Just going to delete this one. Okay, so now we need to set our column types because that wasn't automatic. So you'll notice that these are all ABC123, which means Power BI doesn't know what data type these are. So I'm going to start with our views and make that a number. So data type, whole number. Then last modified time, that is going to be a date, time, time zone. Don't try and go directly to date, time. It won't work because it's got the time zone in it. You can go to date, time, time zone and then change it to date if you want to. So for example, you can change this to date. If I do replace current, it'll break. So I'm going to add it as a new step because you can't go directly from the text value of the date, time, time zone directly to date. It doesn't quite figure that out. So to take a jump through the date, time, time zone type to get there. And the rest of these, I'm just going to make text. So I'm going to hold control and select these. Okay, so we've got our site list now. So we can put this information in a table visual. We can conditionally format the path so that it's a clickable link if we want to. We could clean up this content class column by, say, adding a conditional column that relabels it to site and subsite. There's also the template here that tells you what type of site this is. So you could friendlyify this up. Group is going to be your team sites. Site page publishing is your communication sites. STS is going to be a team site, but one that is not linked to a team, if that makes sense. So a team site is a type of site template. It doesn't necessarily have to be linked to a Teams group. The other thing we want to do with this is filter out our OneDrive and some of the back-end SharePoint sites that exist. So Since the OData feeds are security trimmed, you'll only see your own OneDrive sites in here. However, you do want to filter them out because you don't want them to show in reporting. So to do that, we can use this web template column. So we want to filter out this SPS PERS, stands for personal, I think it's the OneDrive, and point publishing hub, and the point publishing topic. We want to take out the app catalog also. So that'll leave just our normal SharePoint sites. All right, and while we're in here, let's do our query for the API browser so we can kind of look around and see what's in here. So to do that, we're going to go to the Home tab again, go to New Source and OData Feed, just like last time, except this time for our URL parts, we want our parameter and we want /_API /, and that's it. Click OK. Most of the interesting stuff is going to be in web, but you could also do files and lists here, but keep in mind that files and lists also exists under web. So web really has most of the content in it. So I'm going to do that one, click OK. And here's what we end up with. So again, the purpose of this query is to be able to browse and see what's available in the OData feed. So you can highlight these cells to get a preview down here at the bottom. You can click into these to expand and browse that way. We could use this later on when we're getting particular things out of the API, but I just wanted to show you that it's in here so that you can see what's in there. And I like to convert this to a table so that I can search easier and filter easier. And again, since we're right now, this is linked to a single SharePoint site. In another video, we're going to set up a function that goes and does whatever we're querying here from our site list up here. So just for the sake of closure, I'm going to put together a report page with this content so you can see what it looks like. If you know how to create a table visual that has the conditional formatting for clickable site links and all that, then you could probably skip this part, but I just wanted to kind of close the loop here. So we did a close and apply on our SP sites data. So now we're going to make a table visual and we're going to drop our content in there. So we want the site title, the template, views, last modified date, and we're going to change this last modified date format. So click on the name of the field there and change the format to whatever you want. We'll do short date. And the author. And by the way, I think the most recent views is going to be the last 14 days, but I'm not entirely certain about that. So now what we need to do is to tell Power BI that the path field is actually a URL. So I'm going to click on the path field in the sidebar here and then go to data category and change the data category to web URL. Maybe I'll do the same thing for the parent link too, because that's also a URL. And that's going to let us do conditional formatting. That's a clickable link. So I'm going to go to the site title field here, and I'm going to go to conditional formatting, web URL, and then I'm going to select the path. So it's automatically summarizing by first path, but since there's only ever one path per row in this table, that's fine. Click OK, and now we have a clickable link. So the content class, I'm going to go back into the transform data and relabel that a little bit. So I'm going to do a conditional column, and I'm going to say the content class equals yes site, then site, or if content class is STS web, then website, else null. So I'll give us a more friendly, oops, I should have named that something, huh? Call this site, website. Okay, so we're going to use that as a filter on our page. So I'm just going to put this in the page level filters so you can filter on which ones are subsites. These are actually my subsite names, by the way. They're called subsite because I was just testing how subsites came through in the API, but that'll let us filter on that. And We could also make this a matrix, but we have a whole bunch of text columns, and the text columns in matrices don't mesh super well, so I'm just going to leave it as is. We could also make a chart with this data, so we could do a site title, the sum of recent views. And I'm going to import a theme real quick because the default theme bothers me. And I kind of like the table style of minimal. Okay, maybe I'll do one of these hierarchy ones. So let's do the web template as the category and the count of the site ID for the values. Count. Give this a better title. And we can turn on the data labels. All right, so there's our super awesome report. For some reason, the order on tables never follows the theme. There we go. So there's our super quick rundown on how to get the basic site statistics out of the SharePoint OData feed. You could, at this point, publish the report and schedule refresh on it so that it is automatically up to date. So I hope this was useful to you, and thank you again to Jordan for sharing this technique with us. And stay tuned for a few more detailed explanations of how to do very specific things with this data. So I think next up I'm going to do how to get the information about lists and libraries, to keep an eye on what your top most used libraries are, where you have the most activity, and maybe where you're approaching the list view threshold in SharePoint lists. So keep an eye out for that, and I hope you have a great day.